This video is going to ruffle some feathers. Hi, welcome back to my channel and thanks for stopping by. Hopefully this isn't the first video that you're going to be watching. So it's Saturday and we're currently in my kitchen. I'm getting some coffee. I'm going to clean a little bit and we're going to talk about something very light and not serious at all. The fact that I was in a religious cult. Do I drink my coffee black? Not normally. Normally I have cream, but unfortunately I ran out, so I have to go get some. For the moment, we are drinking it black. So the reason why I think that this video is going to be a little bit controversial is because many people put themselves voluntarily into these types of religious organizations. Why? Because they believe that their salvation depends on it. So it's a voluntary act. So if you in any way talk against that, then you're talking against their whole system of living. And that's not my purpose. My goal is to give a clear representation of my past, my experiences, which even if you were in the same religious organization that I was a part of, maybe your experiences were different, which is fine. But I want to give context to the rest of my story. So as always, we need to define our terms. So let me look quickly at the definition of cult. Okay. A system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object. So in a general sense, we can see any religion as a cult. A further definition, a relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange or sinister. So that's where we can talk about. All of the smaller types of cults that resulted in murders or any other illegal activity. But for my case, it was a religious cult, small, relatively small. It was a traditional Catholic community. Everyone's heard of Catholics, but this group was a smaller division which was devoted to a more traditional approach towards Catholicism. In the 60s, there was a change in the liturgy and some of the ideas, and the founders of this particular community decided to stick to the old ways. So not only was this group against the world in general, but it was also against the more mainstream Catholics, the more modern Catholics. And it's interesting, I noticed this, and I'm not the only one, that because this group was so much on the fringe, it attracted people, the outliers, who were kind of quirky, extremists. There were people that believed in the monarchy and believed that was the best form of government and promoting it. People that you would label alt-right, that went for the Confederacy, probably racist. There was all of the misfits found their place within this community. And of course, remember, I'm speaking about the particular community that I was a part of in the city that I came from. But I know for a fact that some of these characteristics also apply to others around the country. So because the more conservative-minded people and these extremists all kind of found their place within this community, a lot of people had an air of superiority, that they were in the know, that they were the few that knew the truth. And because of that, there was constant criticism and judgment of everyone else, especially the other Catholics, because the whole position of this community was against the modern changes in the Catholic Church. So there was a constant bashing. Look how bad they are. Look how bad they are. The priests confirming this sentiment in their sermons. And you really were confirmed in your ways. You really did think, wow, I am a part of something important. And this is, I'm where God wants me to be. Of course, if you look at the Twitter profiles of not only the community that I was a part of, but other similar communities, because they are very similar. If you look at the way that they behave when they talk about the other communities, it's very, very harsh. And there's this idea in Christianity and Catholicism of a charity, to have charity to other people. And it just seems to disappear. You don't have to be charitable for people who are wrong. And you look at these people who are talking on Twitter and how high and mighty they appear. And it's sad. It's very sad. There's even some news agencies among these traditional circles that, if you just look at them from an outside perspective, the people look crazy. They look absolutely crazy. But when you're inside the circle, it seems like this is the most important thing ever. But from the outside, you look and you think, I would never want to be a part of that family. Never, ever, ever. So, good job, people. Although my family was conservative, it was never that crazy. We found that out very quickly. So, because in the community, there was this emphasis on traditional ways of living, that obviously went towards the structure of the family. A man and a woman. The man is the head of the family, and the woman is the handmaid, is the helper of the man. She does all of the housework. She takes care of the children. I remember, not only in the church that I went to, but other churches affiliated with this congregation, the ideal families that were held up as the examples were the ones where the wife was very demure, was very submissive. She stayed at home. She didn't work. She tended towards the care of the children. And usually the number of children, especially in the top families of this congregation, there was one that had 16, 17 children. A few of them priests or religious. And I know for a fact that a lot of the other women and the mothers of different families looked to them and felt ashamed that although they had 2 children or 3 children, they felt a pressure to be as much as possible like these other families. The priest from the pulpit would encourage this way of living, and of course the fathers and the mothers of the families that were a little bit more reasonable or normal, they would feel pressure because God wants you to have as many children as possible. God wants you to act like this if you're a woman or like this if you're a man. And I think everyone can relate to the fact that not every man and woman fits into that structure. And I saw myself from an outsider perspective trying to fit in. Where did I fit in? There's no place for a more artistic, sensitive man who likes men, obviously. There's no place for me in this structure. Where do I fit? So I tried to find my place, and it was difficult, and eventually I thought I found it, and it didn't happen. The isolation from the world also extended to technology. There was no technology that should be allowed in the household because it was a corruption of the youth. One time the priest from the pulpit brought a television and a sledgehammer. I wasn't there, but I heard the story, and I'm imagining some of the reactions of some of the older people that were there that were probably freaked the heck out. And the priest was talking about the evils of pornography, the evils of technology, and people still in the church have TVs. And he took a sledgehammer out from the pulpit during the service. And luckily, one of the fathers of the family saw what was happening and that the priest was losing his mind and grabbed the TV and brought it out. I think he actually ended up throwing it out the front door. But just that craziness, absolute craziness. This was encouraged. This was the ideal, to live in a bubble, because that was the only safe place to be. Living close to the land, dressing like, I don't know if you've seen the TV show Little House on the Prairie, but that was basically, there were people who dressed like that, who acted like that, and those were the ideal families. And some of us normal families who have maybe had a TV in the house looked at each other like, oops, we're not there yet. And those families were the favorites of the priest. Everyone wanted to be a favorite of the priest, which was another problem. Because the world was so bad, because things were so confusing in the world, people looked to the priest not only to help them with spiritual questions or problems that they have, but they would go to the priest for normal day-to-day decisions, how to act, how to behave, because they were so unsure about how to live, how to maneuver in the world, being a part of this community, that they needed the guidance of the priest. Some of the priests were not playing that game, but a lot of the priests were. A lot of the priests established these communities and certain behaviors that resulted in craziness, that resulted in people acting like they belonged to a different century. Why did we remain in this community? Good question. We put up with a lot of people, a lot of internal fighting, because obviously when you're sick and tired of constantly pointing the finger at other people, you start pointing the finger inside the family, inside the community. There was situations where families were scorned because maybe they let their daughters dress in a more feminine, attractive way. Maybe their skirt was a little bit above the knee or a little bit tighter. Those families did feel isolated. There were people that would just randomly come in and visit, and if the woman had pants on, there were stories of older members of the church, older women, who would run over to them and make sure that they had their headscarf. Yes, the women had to wear a scarf on their head during the service. So they would go throw a scarf on them, make sure that they had a skirt, or those people who were just visiting would leave. We were so convinced that there was no other place to go in the world. There was no other community that was going to give the truth, that was going to teach us the way that God wanted. We were so convinced that even though, you know how they say that you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. We just thought that, like, okay, these are siblings that we don't necessarily agree with, but we have to put up with them because what's important is that we belong. These were the only people that we had. That's just a very short overview of kind of the environment that I grew up in that religious community. And I know people are going to, I know these people, they're going to say, who was the priest? Who were the people in that church? What was the congregation? They're going to try to figure out all of that information so that they can perpetuate that idea of pointing fingers and thinking, I knew that they were wrong. I knew this. I knew that. I'm better. I'm right. I'm so happy I'm not a part of that. And if you want to focus on that, go ahead. But you're not going to get the information from me. I'm not going to give out names because it's not the important thing. Because these traits exist in so many different communities. And not only Catholic communities. In this world that there's so much craziness that is happening. There are people who are flocking to these communities because they want some sort of security, and some communities are taking advantage of that. I want you to take my own experience and apply it to your life, or just to even realize that yes, these things still exist. And I know that there's cults that are a lot worse than the one that I was a part of. There was a lot of good things that I learned too, and I hope in one video to express those good things. So I'll stop there. I could say a lot more, and I just want to give a basic context, the setting of the scene of the rest of my ideas, and give you the perspective of where I was, especially during the early part of my life, like from 15 until I went to college. And by the way, I went to a college in an even more isolated community that was a part of this religious cult. That's another story. So anyway, thanks for this very, very, very lighthearted video, and I will see you on the next one. Please comment, share, like, dislike, comment, tell me I'm wrong, yell at me, whatever. Remember that other people are looking at your comments too, not just me, and seeing the way that you respond might actually confirm my ideas. I hope to see you on the next one. Have a wonderful day.